taking a break to enter investigation. Police say the suspects entered a backyard each growth drive in Orange area just before
let us take it from there. We see more often than not when people comply that
conservatives are standing here today based on the principle that your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
Welcome to the Golden Belt Buckle podcast. Today we're going to be talking about castle law. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is going to be introducing legislation to hopefully pass a castle law for Canada. This in light of the last 9 years we've had violent crime skyrocketing. I mean, it's down since 1992, but when you look at the charts, it's clearly up if you start looking at for the last 9 years. And according to him, you can blame the Liberals for this problem. So lots of blame going around. So we're gonna look at the current situation, and then we're gonna get into the law and kind of nerd out on that a little bit, and talk about what castle law is, and then compare it, and that's as it's practiced in the States, and then compare it to our own criminal code. Now, before we go on, if you like the content, do me a favor, like and subscribe, comment, let me know your thoughts down below. And also, before we get going, the funny thing is you get talking about this issue, in the heat of the moment, none of this is going to matter, right? Most of us, if we have kids, we're not going to care what the law is. If someone breaks into our house, it doesn't even matter if it's our house, whether it's on the street. If we're with our family, we're not just going to let someone attack our family. So this is an interesting discussion, but I'm sure most people watching this would be perfectly fine being judged by 12 rather than carried by 6, as the saying goes. Most of us would rather spend the rest of our lives in prison than let some lowlife attack our family. So this is an interesting discussion. I hope the conservatives get their way, but whether they do or they don't, it doesn't matter. So anyway, normal people just know it's their natural right to defend themselves. We don't need a government slip of paper or a law to tell us we can defend ourselves. We just know that's our right. Our bodies, everything about us is geared toward giving life. And when we grow up, we get a job, we get a career, we start building a life, we get married, we have kids. We build a life for ourselves. And that when you put your heart and soul into something, that is your mind, your energy. It's all manifest in the things that you own. Okay, so I would probably go farther and say you should be able to defend your own property as well. Without private property laws, what's the point on building anything up when people can just take it and destroy it? So, but we're not talking necessarily about that. We are talking about self-defense. Let's get into it. Again, like and subscribe if you like this content. I enjoy bringing it to you. It's a little bit off the beaten path from what I normally talk about, but this is an issue that's I'm fascinated by it. I did actually have someone try to get in my house when I was younger. It was 12 o'clock at night. I was watching television, sitting there in my skivvies, and then I looked into our picture window and I saw someone coming up the stairs, and they opened up our door. I was like 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. And I'm going to tell you what, I didn't know who this was. It was around midnight. I was terrified. I think I was watching Saturday Night Live, but I was pretty terrified. Okay, I went and got my dad, and we went outside. We called the police, got some baseball bats out. They left. They didn't get in the house. I don't know if it was a drunk guy or what, but it was pretty terrifying. And last thing on my mind was proportionality, reasonable defense. I didn't care about that. Okay, we were going to do what we had to do in that situation. All right, so let's get into it. So the current situation that we've got going on here is that there is a real perception. There is a perception, and I believe it's real, that violent crime is on the increase. It has been down the last couple of years, but when I look at the stats, it's clearly on its way up. So although total crime, as I mentioned, it's down since 1982, it appears that that in the last 8 to 9 years, there's been an uptick. And I'm not sure it just started when the Liberals took control, because it looks like what'd they come in? Is it 2000? 15. Okay, maybe it did start when they took control. Although the violent crime is down, there is a bit of an uptick overall in the last 8 years. So if you just judge them by the past year, it is down, but it is up in the grand scheme of things. And so the problem for us here in Southern Ontario is that it's, especially if you live in the GTA or anywhere near Brampton or Mississauga, it's in your face every day. You can't even keep up with the news stories because it seems like there's one every week. There's people getting stabbed. There's people that they get their homes broken into. One guy, he got his home broke into, and he ended up stabbing the guy. He got arrested for assault for I think that guy, I can't remember what he was charged for, but it's like attempted murder. I can't remember. It was some ridiculous charge that probably won't even stick. And then there was the other fella recently. He was defending his family. He got shot dead right in front of his kids. So, I mean, it's right in your face. Attempted home invasions, car thefts, and you got these. I'm sorry, guys, but it just sounds like clownish advice for a police officer to stand up and say, just comply. Just comply with them. Yeah, because anybody that knows how to defend themselves or has a modicum of common sense is just going to comply if someone tries to come into their house. I don't know if anyone realizes this, but letting armed individuals into your house and then complying with them, especially they do what they did with that one guy. They zip-tied his hands, him and his girlfriend. Once they do that to you, they can do whatever they want to you. I mean, they already have the upper hand if they have a gun and you don't. But to let them put a zip tie on you, they can do whatever they want in that situation. They can grape your wife or your girlfriend or your daughter. They can do whatever they want. So the idea that you're just going to comply makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. And it also makes no sense when they want you to try and get away. As a married man with 5 kids, I know that's not possible, okay? Any man that would save himself, right? That's the only way you're going to do it, right? You're going to get away by saving yourself. If you manage to save yourself, you might as well unalive yourself, because your name is going to be mud in your community anyways for abandoning your family. And I hope none of us that watching this ever gets put in that situation where we have to have our metal tested. So that just, it makes no sense to me. If you have kids, you're not running away. You don't have time. I remember once a police officer said to me, yeah, when you can't use your firearms to defend yourself either, because in Canada you're not allowed to keep them loaded, you have to keep them locked up. So if you have time to get your gun and load it, you have time to get away. Really? How about I'm going to go room to room getting all 5 of my kids up when someone's banging in my door? No, there is no time, okay? So it just, his entire advice for everybody just seems so nonsensical. It seemed naive, which is ironic coming from a police officer. Horrible advice. It just seems like in Canada, there's this expectation that you are supposed to roll over and die. Okay, that's what it seems like. You're just meant to roll over and die. You go along, start your family, build your life together, put your heart and soul into your property, or you accumulate possessions for your apartment. You put your heart and soul into raising your kids, and then when someone steps in, you just got to roll over and die. You can't do anything, and even if you do something about it, you're going to spend years, possibly in jail. You're going to have to spend a fortune in legal fees, and it's ridiculous. Now, it is not true, looking into this topic, it is not true that you are necessarily going to go to prison if you defend yourself. There is plenty of legal precedent to show that if someone breaks into your house, if you need to put them down, then you will be able to do that within the confines of the law, but that's going to be determined by the court. So you are going to have to go through the process, and you're probably going to get arrested. You're probably going to get charged for second-degree murder. But there is precedent showing that you're not necessarily going to go to prison. So, I mean, in one sense, it's kind of a myth that you can't defend yourself. But you need to know that if you do defend yourself and someone gets really hurt or they die, you're going to have a lot of money to shell out to lawyers, and it could end up breaking you. And Canada has the opposite problem of the United States. In the United States, there seems to be this idea with a lot of people that you can just shoot people. Someone comes into your house and you can just shoot the person. And just so you know, most of you guys, I know you're Americans watching this, you can't just do that, right? And we'll get into this and show you, even under castle laws in the United States, even stand your ground. You don't just get to kill someone unless your life is in danger. You're not allowed to just kill someone. So, but there is a difference. There's a slight difference. So this is the landscape of Canada right now. It's just Canada just, it's perceived as weak, right? And like I said, we're going to talk about this now, but in reality, you're not just going to let someone attack your family. So let's get into this a little bit. This current landscape is what led Pierre Poilievre in a recent speech to say, and that is why conservatives are standing here today based on the principle that your home is your castle. So castle law dates back to the 1600s, and we're not going to get into the history because even though I looked into it, I'm not getting into the history. That'll make this cumbersome and long. So let's go look at a couple definitions here. I think I got both of them downloaded. Actually, I think I might have only downloaded one. This is a good one. So we're going to look at a definition from Cornell Law School in the States. The castle doctrine refers to an exception to the duty to retreat before using deadly self-defense if a party is in their home. Excuse me. Under the doctrine of self-defense, a party who reasonably believes they are threatened with the immediate use of deadly force can legally respond with a proportional amount of force to deter that threat. The doctrine of self-defense is subject to various restrictions which differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Excuse me. So again, in the States, there's this perception you can shoot people and you're going to get away with it. You're not necessarily going to get away with it. Even Americans have to have, it says they need to reasonably believe they are threatened, right? And that deadly force is the only way to get rid of that threat, right? And in some ways, it's not, this is the thing, in some ways, it's not much different than what, at least from my perspective, what I see, it's not much different than what we already have in our criminal code. So we'll get back to the castle law in just 1 second. Pierre Poilievre, what he's saying. So 34.1 says in our criminal justice, criminal code, a person is not guilty of an offense if they believe on reasonable grounds that force is being used against them or another person, or that a threat of force is being made against them or another person. B, the act that constitutes the offense is committed for the purpose of defending or protecting themselves or the other person from that use of threat or force. And C, if the act is committed under reasonable circumstances. So you can defend yourself in Canada. To think you can't is a myth. If someone breaks into my house, the key is proportionality. If a guy breaks in, I better make sure they're actually a threat. Sometimes if let's say you're living out in the country, someone might break into your house because their car broke down and it's the middle of winter and they're frozen. You better make sure that they are actually posing a threat and they're not just someone in duress or in need of your assistance. If you do, you're going to prison, right? And you deserve it. On the other hand, if you could convince a jury that person, let's say they broke in wearing a balaclava, if you can convince them that person looked like a thug and they were acting like a thug, then you can get off on it. I read when I was reading this about and I'm sorry, I don't have the reference right here, because I kind of put it out of my head, but there was a guy, he actually shot a police officer here in Canada. He was serving him a warrant, I believe it was, and he was doing a dynamic entry, and the homeowner thought he was a criminal breaking in, and he shot him or he stabbed him. He killed him, and he got off, right? Because it was, so you don't have, and that's despite the fact you don't have any legal authority to resist a police officer. So like if a you don't have all the what we just read here about your legal right to defend yourself, right? If a cop is arresting you and you try to defend yourself, that's called resisting arrest. So, but there's some caveats to this right here. Get right here. It says, In determining, section 34.2, in determining whether the act committed is reasonable, so remember, your act has to be reasonable, in the circumstances, the court shall consider the relevant circumstances of the person, the other parties, and the act, including but not limited to the following factors. A, the nature of the force or threat. B, the extent to which the use of force was imminent, and whether there were other means available to respond to the potential use of force. Or C, the person's role in the incident. D, whether any party to the incident or used or threatened to use a weapon. They're going to take into account the size, age, gender, and physical capabilities of the parties to the incident. The nature, duration, and history of any relationship between the parties to the incident, and including any prior use or threat of force and the nature of that force or threat. They're going to look into if there's any history of interaction or communication between the parties to the incident, the nature and proportionality of the person's response to the use of the threat of force, and whether the act committed was in response to a threat of force that the person knew was lawful. So, when you read this, you see if you have to defend yourself in Canada, they're not just going to let you walk away from it. They're going to look into it. My biggest gripe is that it seems like you just automatically got to get charged for homicide or something. Seems to me they should look into whether the facts before charging you for homicide. It just seems like our Crown attorneys, when I read these cases, that they want to charge someone. They don't. It's almost like it bothers them that an average citizen would ever defend themselves and use lethal force or near lethal force. But at any rate, you're going to get charged. You're going to have to go through the process. And during this process, it happens. It's happened several times, a lot of times, where in the process, they realize, you know what, we can't actually find this guy guilty of a homicide because they were, in fact, defending themselves. Even a woman, I think it was 1990, there was the Laval case. A woman preemptively killed her boyfriend. He wasn't even attacking her at the time. But the law had to evolve because they needed to realize that, you know what, again, it takes into account the gender, the size. This woman felt threatened. She had been abused by her boyfriend. I believe it was her boyfriend, not husband. And she felt she had to defend herself, right? There's a battered woman syndrome defense now. So they're going to look at it from all sides to figure out, was this actually justifiable, right? And it's not the Castle Law, but you do have the right to defend yourself. It's very similar to the Castle Law. And you read what, the American definitions, even the American courts, they're going to look into whether or not the action was actually justified. Carl Rittenhouse, right? The guy shot a guy with a shotgun. He didn't just get away with it. He had to answer for that. And he was found not guilty, right? They looked at it from every way, shape, or form they could find. So, there wasn't much of a difference there, except he was out in public with a firearm. I don't think that would fly in Canada. I'm not sure. But so that led Pierre Poilievre to say, so section 34.2, I think, is where he wants to, where it talks about the reasonableness. He said the use of force, including lethal force, is presumed reasonable against an individual who unlawfully enters a house and poses a threat to the safety of anyone inside. So, reading the criminal law as it is right now, you can already defend yourself, and it is possible you might take someone's life in that process. But when I see Pierre Poilievre coming out with what he's saying here, what I see is a guy saying, in case you don't get the message, stay the hell out of people's houses where you don't belong. That is what I'm seeing from all this. Why? Because the law is going to presume that the homeowner has a legal justification. They're going to assume it. They're not going to look at you like you're the guilty party till you're proven innocent. They're going to look at you like you're innocent until you're proven guilty. Right? And so it boils down to, if you don't want to get shot, if you don't want to get stabbed to death, don't break into people's houses. Not hard, right? Pretty simple. Anyway, that's a quick look at it. Depending on the response to this video, I might go a little bit deeper into it. I'll probably go deeper into it for myself anyways. Till next time, keep the rubber side down. Cheers.